One of the most formidable castles throughout history was Lincoln Castle, and it became a site of execution where many people were hanged on the walls, overlooking the cathedral, and the population would look on. On top of one of the towers, a gallows stood, and people were brought to their deaths with the thousands of people below spectating, as justice was administered. It is a castle that is unique, as it has two moats. However, inside is a prison that became one of the most feared across the country. Inside of the prison, a separate system was used, in which inmates were kept isolated for 24 hours a day. And even in the chapel they were locked in wooden boxes, so they could not communicate with each other. But it was a castle that also became known for imprisoning children. But what is the story of this? Welcome to Learn With Me. Join us today as we look at the brutal castle that held children behind bars. And to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Following the Norman conquest, William the Conqueror believed his position was not very secure, as the English were very hostile to the fact a Frenchman was now ruling over them. He built a castle in Lincoln at the heart of a Viking trading centre, and it towered above the countryside and offered views for miles around, overlooking the Fosse Way and the River Trent as well as the Lincolnshire wolds. It was first a wooden motte and bailey, but over time it transitioned to become a stone keep. It was besieged during the Second Battle of Lincoln during the reign of Henry III, during the First Barons' War. Further additions to the castle were added to make it stronger, but the biggest addition to the castle throughout the centuries was the establishment of a jail. Executions were common at the castle, as were royal prisoners. William Chadwell was held at Lincoln in 1643, and he claimed he had been thrown in a stinking witch hole, showing how horrific the dungeon was he was held in. He was also referring to the fact that beaver witches were held there at Lincoln before they were hanged for their involvement in allegedly causing the death of the Duke of Rutland's son. It was here also where 19th century hangman William Marwood would use a long drop to execute prisoners, rather than to just make them strangle, and this was considered quicker and more humane. The jail was built in 1787, then extended in 1847, and the old prison is a three-storey building with 15 bays, and here many people were imprisoned. Debtors were held there as they owed money, and were given some social contact, but the separate regime that prisoners lived in was very isolating and tough. The system was seen as a hard way of reforming, but as the site became overcrowded, diseases were also common there, and many people suffered from jail fever, as rooms and cells became filled with 2 or 3 inmates, when they were originally meant for just one. The castle, to begin with, operated as a private business, and prisoners had to pay for their keep, and jailers charged them for food and bedding and other luxuries. A prison governor and a governess would be housed in the prison, as a women's section was added later, and it was a holding centre for male, female and children prisoners, who would then be tried inside of the courthouse within the castle's walls. The courthouse is still used today for certain trials, but what is shocking is the fact that many children found themselves also imprisoned amongst the men and women of the castle. There were many crimes that children could even be executed for during the 18th and 19th centuries, and crimes such as arson were considered very serious. One young boy there who was held for setting fire to hay that caused damage in a farmer's field was later charged with arson and was transported across to Australia. Children as young as 6 could be admitted during the Victorian period in the prison, and the youngest prisoner was Benjamin Peacock, who was actually born inside the prison walls as his mother was locked up. But he did not live long, and was buried inside the walls of the Lucy Tower, above the motte, and his grave today is marked by a small tombstone. The system that the prisoners were kept in was very unpopular with the guards and jailers, as they were not allowed to speak to them, and they didn't even know their names. The complete isolation sent prisoners mad, and the children who were held there could not really understand what was going on. Many children who were held at Lincoln were later transported, and some were given a reprieve, as times were beginning to change and attitudes towards executing especially children were changing, as they believed more in rehabilitation. But it was within the brutal and tough walls of Lincoln Castle that saw many children imprisoned accused of some of the most serious crimes. The age of criminal responsibility for years was around 6 or 7, and with this across England many children were locked up behind bars. It was incredibly tough, but Lincoln Castle became one of the most feared sites of imprisonment in England. Thanks for watching. As always, to support Learn With Me, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.